Welcome to Scarlet Tavern. Grab a drink, take a seat, and let's begin. On tonight's episode, we will be discussing the haunting in Connecticut. We welcome back the Warrens into this episode. With them involved, this must be true. This is the Scarlet Tavern. All right, we are back.
Yes.
I want to welcome everybody back. At the time of recording this, it is the Tuesday before Easter. By the time this comes out, it'll be May, almost June. But yeah, at the time of recording this, it's almost Easter. So we want to wish everybody a happy Easter on Sunday. And I want to kind of kick it off. We have Cara and Elliot back with us this week. So we want to welcome them as well. But I want to kick this off with a question because everybody comes from different upbringings, different cultures, and things like that. So I want to ask everybody what both growing up and now, what is your Easter tradition? Ben, being the Catholic, especially growing
Nothing.
up.
Nothing. Easter, despite its significance in Christianity, my mother would plant an Easter basket when I was younger. I'd be a little kid and try and find it, but I grew up in a really teeny tiny home, so after I remember after maybe 3 years of my mother attempting to hide it, she just kind of well, I've run out of places to hide it, so she just stopped doing it. I would get one gift, which would usually be a movie, and whatever candy that would last me for half the year.
Till Halloween.
Yeah, and, well, actually, in some cases, it'd be a little longer, because I was one of those weird kids who just never liked candy. Even today, I'll eat candy.
I'm not that big of a candy person either.
I joke, when I got older, I used to joke to my parents. I told them that, if a stranger tried to lure me away with candy, they would fail 10 out of 10 times. I'd never go near them. Now, if they tried to lure me away with mozzarella sticks,
Ben,
yeah, you'd find me.
I have breaded cheese in my van.
What, a double order, single order?
Steaming hot breaded cheese. Big loaf.
With marinara sauce.
Okay, now you lost me.
With ranch.
Ew! What is wrong with you?
I have folded pizza with pineapple on it.
I hate
Okay, now
I quit.
Out.
Yeah.
Pineapple on pizza is amazing.
No, you're
I
wrong.
can't do the texture.
It's so good.
It was meant to be eaten.
It was never but no, I never really had an Easter tradition. It was just another day. Obviously, we knew the significance of it and our thing, but I mean, it just wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, we put more significance, religious significance on Christmas and stuff like that. Easter was just, and I feel like it's mostly because Easter was, they always say Christmas was heavily commercialized, but it's nothing compared to Easter.
So, obviously we don't want to get into
the
political side, but obviously the original Easter is pagan. It was named after Eoster. And that is where basically what happened is the Christians did have their version of Easter, but they took the pagan name and some of their traditions to make it easier for the pagans to transition into Christianity and make it more welcoming to them, which is why Easter exists as it does now, because the eggs and the bunny are a pagan tradition. It symbolizes fertility.
Fertility and
So and that just kind of carried over, and the Christians just kind of use the pagan symbols still. But yeah, it's originally named after Eoster, which is a Norse pagan god, or goddess. But yeah, so growing up, obviously I grew up in a very religious household. It was Easter Sunday. We would go to church, do all of the Easter stuff. Everybody would dress up, dress all nice. You'd have to have your suit and tie on and all of that. And then you had Easter lunch, so you would leave and you'd have your ham and your typical Easter feast with the family, and then the kids would do the Easter eggs, and there would be melted candy inside the Easter eggs, because I'm from Florida. Candy melts inside of plastic eggs in the Florida sun in April.
Aaron,
Yes,
I don't
it
think you thought that.
does.
Aaron, I don't think you thought that one through.
Yeah. As we got older, we got money inside the eggs.
You got money?
Yeah. We would get change, and then you would get some really good ones that would have like a $5-10 bill in it.
Oh, okay. Now that the memories are coming back. Yes, my grandmother did do
it's
that. It's
always the grandparents that do that. They would put.
Yeah.
You'd have like some eggs that had like pennies in it and stuff like that, and then you'd have like the one egg that has like $5 and $10 in it.
My cousins always found my grandparents only put like a couple dollars. I think once someone found a 5. I always found the pennies and the dimes. My cousins always got the cash.
But yeah, other than that, and then our church would always hold an Easter egg hunt, and so we would do that, and of course, pictures with the Easter bunny and stuff like that. Now I don't do any of that, so I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Some of those costumes with the Easter bunny are kind of creepy. I don't blame you.
Old like 70s ones.
Oh yeah.
Kara.
yeah.
What did you do back as a kid compared to what you do now?
Come back to me, because food's about done.
Okay.
So.
Elliot.
It's kind of similar to yours. Besides, we didn't really go to church. We kind of made it. Instead of going to church and having the feast with the. I'm not sure if you had the feast with the churchgoers, but it was always at my grandmom's house.
Every once in a while, we would have like a Passover where they would do it. They would do it the week before.
Yeah, we would go straight to my grandparents' house. We would do the same with the eggs. When we got older, turned into baskets. And then we went to my grandmother's house, and we would do like the little feast with the ham, mashed potatoes, corn, all that good stuff. And just kind of spend the day there for the most part. The kids still have like Easter eggs that they go and find. It was nice. We still kind of do that to this day. If usually I don't get a basket anymore, obviously. But like they'll usually get me like a little chocolate Reese cup egg.
My mother will still gather like a little tiny thing for me and Pam and give it to us. And it's like, here's your Easter basket. And I was like, okay.
Batteries.
Thanks, Mom.
I'll get something.
Actually, I love it. If my mother were to give me batteries, I actually would be very happy. Yeah, I was like, if she gave me batteries to like, I'd be like, oh, gee, thanks. You just saved me a trip to CVS.
Well, no, like I went to Dollar Tree today. My goal was to make dinner with everything from Dollar Tree that I could, to see if I could do it. And I did. I had the chicken already. And then I got the noodles, the garlic, everything I needed, because I make my Alfredo from scratch.
Yeah.
and I got literally everything I needed from Dollar Tree. But I went into Dollar Tree today, and at least the one I went to, they have a dollar more section where everything's like $3 and $5, and you can get like lunch boxes and bath mats and welcome mats and towels and stuff like that. I was like, Jesus Christ! First it's $1.25. Now you're having a whole section where it's $3 and $5. Um, but with that, I don't want to take up too much time because I want to get into this. Ben is going to take this today. So go ahead, Ben.
All right. So tonight we will be exploring the Snedeker family hauntings. In the late 1980s, a series of paranormal incidents were said to have occurred in the home of the Snedeker family in Southington, Connecticut. The family would claim that gruesome and horrific acts of physical and sexual abuse would occur to various members of the family over a period of many years. This haunting would draw much notoriety and attention, particularly from the famous and controversial paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren.
And this means that this story is true.
The truest of the true.
Yes, absolutely. This is a story that would help launch some well-known paranormal television series and movies. This is the story of a haunting in Connecticut. In 1986.
Oh, wrong.
Yeah, we need to add another music thing to that. I felt like I needed some
I
music.
returned.
Dun dun dun.
Very good.
I returned.
In 1986, Carmen and Al Snedeker regularly drove long distances from their home in northern New York to a specialized doctor to treat their son Philip, who suffered from Hodgkin's disease. They soon decided the toll of commuting from northern New York to Connecticut was taking too much of a financial and emotional toll, and decided to move closer to their son's medical treatment center. They soon found a home for rent in Southington, Connecticut. The Snedeker family found the new home spacious enough for themselves and also their nieces, who decided to live with them as well. During the renovations of the home, specifically the basement, which they were converting into 2 bedrooms for their children, Al Snedeker discovered mortuary tools and equipment, including a pulley system for lifting caskets, casket handles, and a blood drainage pit. Excuse me. By their accounts, this is when they discovered that their new home had, for several years before they moved in, had been a funeral home. Undaunted, they continued to convert the basement into bedrooms for their 2 sons, and this is as early as the first night that the boys were sleeping in the room. This is when the paranormal activity they claimed would start. Phil, go ahead.
So, for those that don't know, they were talking about the son having Hodgkin's disease. Correct? It's the son?
Yes.
Yes. So this is, for those that don't know, this is Hodgkin's lymphoma. Hodgkin's lymphoma is a brutal cancer. Starts in the white blood cells. You'll see lymph nodes swelling. Typically in the arms is usually where it's seen, like neck, armpits, stuff like that. Even the groin. Fatigue, fever, chills. It is treatable with chemo and radiation. A lot of people have beat Hodgkin's lymphoma, but that is the ones that are healthy. It's typically highest among teens and adults, like 15 to 39. And then older adults, 75 and older. The older ones are the ones that usually die from it. Hodgkin's lymphoma is not fun at all. It is one of the worst cancers to get.
Yes, it is. So Philip would complain of hearing strange noises and voices in his room. He also would say that he saw shadowy figures in his room and in the basement area. He'd also said that he saw a man with white hair wearing a pinstripe suit, and he also said he had black eyes. So he became very terrified by these apparitions, and just by being in his room, he would often beg his parents to just let him stay overnight at the hospital instead of coming home, which is pretty bad. Anybody who's had to spend overnight at the hospital,
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody. This kid was begging for it. That should tell you something. Despite
having had a few overnights myself. Yeah, no.
Well, despite his insistence that these events are happening, his parents, they simply blamed these on the hallucinations of his medical treatment and the stress of medical care. Also, around this time, his mood and his attitude started to change. They said that he started wearing leather. He started to develop a strong interest in the occult.
So he played D&D.
Yeah, I was like,
and listened to rock music.
I was looking. I was
Yeah.
like, well, half of this describes my father, God rest his soul, when he was in the '80s. When he was a kid in the '80s. I was like,
I mean, you were a kid in the 80s, but
I was born in '88. I am a child of the '90s, sir.
you're an adult of the 90s.
Funny. His behavior also started to become more erratic and violent to the point where his family actually had to send him away. He also, after this, he at one point tried to break into his neighbor's house in order to steal a gun and to kill his father, Al. And he also allegedly he also assaulted one of his female cousins as well. After Philip left the house, the other children reported activity increased, with them becoming the center of attention of it after Philip left. They claimed to see ghosts, unusual activities, and Carmen and Al also started becoming the victim of these occurrences as well. Carmen alleges while she was mopping the floor, the water in the bucket became blood red. Al and Carmen would also allege that their bed would begin to shake in the rhythm of a heartbeat. So imagine you're just laying in bed and you just feel a thump 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 like that. That's how they would describe it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
We're just getting into it. They also reported strange electrical occurrences would happen in the home, being they would turn on a light and there would be a very unusual glow or hue of the light bulb in question. They would Now if they took, like, if it was a lamp, it would glow strangely in their home, but the moment they took it out of the home, according to them, and plug it into their neighbor's home and plug it in, it would just be a regular light. There would be no strange anything.
So the strange hue of turning on a light and your eyes trying to adjust to the light.
Yeah. I feel like I'm not sure to the extent that Hodgkin's and the treatment can really take mentally on somebody. But I think it's possible that it started as hallucinations, just like they mentioned earlier. And I mean, because if I was very sick with a very deadly disease, the last thing I would want to do was live in a place that was a funeral home. That would be
Yeah.
the only thing on my mind. And I think that it's possible that that mixed with the other stress possibly caused a fracture in this poor young man's mental state. And his sister had no choice but to really go along to make him not feel crazy in this terrible moment in his life.
Okay. Additionally to these strange electrical occurrences, the family also started reporting foul odors reported throughout the house. They would describe it as human BO, fecal matter, and the smell of blood.
So probably what the Warrens' house actually smelled like.
If you ever see what's in their little museum, yeah,
Ugh,
probably.
no, thank you.
Despite these incidents happening over the course of some years, the family actually did not consider the situation dangerous until the incident started to turn violent. One incident described by Carmen Snedeker while she was showering, quote, "The shower curtain very quickly wrapped around me and I couldn't push away. She believes that this thing was trying to kill me." Another incident described by the niece alleges that the entity began to molest and sexually assault her while she slept at night, and in her words, laughed a hideous laugh when it went above her shirt and out the window.
So,
Alan Carmen.
in other words, the mother had just seen American Psycho, or had
We
just
will
seen
get into
Psycho because the wrapping of the shower
shower
curtain,
curtain.
that's Psycho.
Mhm.
And after the incident described, Al Alan Carmen also reported being disturbed by the entity and what they described as an unearthly atmosphere in their bed. Supposedly, they heard 1930s ambient moon music just before one or both of them were assaulted. The couple claimed that they were both sexually assaulted by this unknown paranormal entity multiple times.
I'm sorry,
Carmen,
but all I can think of is
Yeah,
right
what is
before
this
the
ambient moon
the
music?
ghost is
I
like the ghost is like, you know what? I'm gonna rape you, but I'm gonna get in the mood first,
Yeah,
and
it's
hits
I
the
really
tried
radio.
looking
weird.
it. I tried looking it up, and I really couldn't find
There was
anything.
probably a radio station back then that had
Yeah.
mood music.
Um, Carbon also alleges that once, while her niece was being abused, the niece ran down the street screaming, and apparently, all while she's running down the street, and Carmen is running after her. The niece is being abused along the entire way.
It's a persistent
It is
ghost.
at this point, the incidents have started to gain publicity, and they drew the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren. At this point in the Warrens' careers, the Warrens are actually considered a household name, mostly for their involvement in the Amityville murders and other subsequent cases of the Perron family hauntings. They concluded that the Snedeker house was infested with demons, kind of like
What?
cockroaches. Um, After this conclusion, they supposedly arranged with the Catholic Church for an exorcism for the family and cleansed the house. Afterwards, the family moved out of the house and reported no further paranormal incidents. To say that these claims of the Snedeker family are extraordinary are a bit of an understatement, but they are not without their flaws and inconsistencies. One of the main complaints brought by interviewers and others who have questioned the validity of these claims is the inconsistency of the family to keep the story straight. Many of the incidents reported by the niece, whose name they used is Kelly, this is not her real name, on a televised interview, also bear a striking similarity to the other niece named Tammy, who claims made in another interview. Now, it should also be noted that several of these family members do not actually use their names. We do not actually know the names of these nieces, other than what has been presented in the televised interview and in the the subsequent book called "In a Dark Place," written by Ray Grouton, which is based on this incident. We do not actually know these names, so in theory, we don't even know if these nieces exist because other than the handful of televised interviews where there's a two young women are presented on TV as their nieces, we don't know anything about them.
Yeah. Could just be actors for all we know.
Exactly. And as said, the incidents described by one niece all more or less are a copy and paste of the other from the other niece in another interview. another dispute that is one of the core elements of the criticism is the fact of whether or not the family knew that this house was previously a funeral home. Daryl Kern, the owner of the house, says that he disclosed the history of the house and that Alan Carmen were aware that the house used to be a funeral home. Some of the neighbors say that there was at one point, just when they were showing the house, there was actually a faded sign in the front yard that read Hallahan Funeral Home. Although Carmen claims that the sign was covered up in plywood.
They were
Uh,
they were just dying to have the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Honestly, shame on them for moving to a funeral home, knowing what
I
they're kind of
mean,
struggling
you've been told it's a funeral home. I'm sorry, I'm not moving into a funeral home.
with.
That
Especially
ain't
with
happening.
someone fighting an illness like that. Like, I would want them as far away from any kind of feelings like that as
That
possible.
ain't happening.
Well, I mean,
we can acknowledge the fact that the family was in a bit of a bind. They are not from here. And as somebody, I've had a few of my friends from the Air Force who've had to have had to uproot their lives or commute for specialized medical care for family members. It's a pain. It is entirely possible that the family was just in a bind. They have no choice. They need a home.
That's true.
They need it cheap, so they chose it. If it's a funeral home, I mean, if it were up, if when Pam and I have children, and if God forbid, I pray that this doesn't happen, but if I had to do it, and the only choice was move into this old mortuary, it's been decommissioned for a few years, so all the stuff's out. Pam would hate it, but I'd be like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah. But then to twist it like they did.
And as we go forward, this is exactly what it sounds like it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
The owner of the home and several of the neighbors contend that the stories and incidents of the paranormal activity started to occur when the family began to fall behind in the monthly rent.
No.
And they concocted the story in order to gain financially from the publicity.
The Warrens
Treatment's
would never
expensive.
allow that.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, treatment's expensive.
It is. It is. Kern stated that in many interviews, the hauntings were a complete hoax. This claim of the hauntings was the work of the Snedeker family was reinforced by the fact that this home was again a very spacious home, and one of the rooms in the upstairs was rented out to another tenant. Her name was Sandy, who contends that she never encountered any paranormal activity living in the duplex, and stated in the televised interview that the main motivation was again for money, and she confirmed that they had begun falling behind in the rent, and that she was also an employee at the realty company that matched the home to the Snedeker family, and they were also fully aware of the fact that this was once a funeral home.
Yeah, but that lady's room was probably because she had been living there a while. Her room was off limits to haunting.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy would also say that when she spoke to Carmen about Carmen having nightmares and not sleeping, Sandy suggested that she take some sleeping pills and offered to give her some. But Carmen refused and said, "No, it is my father coming to haunt me. I am calling the Warrens."
Who wouldn't?
Yeah. Another source that sheds light on the controversial role of the Warrens in this incident is actually author Ray Grouton. Ray Grouton is a actual prolific author. He has written some many fine horror fiction novels. Unfortunately, in his own words, the In a Dark Place is what he considers the lowest point of his career, and I don't blame him. He wrote the book describes the hauntings of the Snedeker family. During the research of In a Dark Place, he actually complained to Ed Warren that I became very frustrated. It's hard writing a nonfiction book when all the people involved are telling you different stories. He would complain that the stories of the various family members would not mesh with each other. Carmen Snedeker would on some days she would say that they couldn't move because the entity would follow them no matter where they went to. Another incident was she described being continuously assaulted by the entity. Another interview, she said that for a while she was unaware of the hauntings and that it was mostly affecting the children. As we can see, he would express these sentiments and these frustrations to Ed Warren, and Ray Grounton alleges that Ed Warren responded, "Oh, they're crazy. All the people who come to us are crazy. You think sane people would come to us?" And followed this up with, "Just you, just make it up. Just use what works. Just make it up and make it scary." This is probably, listeners, is probably what really is motivating the Warrens and what is actually the main motivation behind it. Because it should also be noted that Ed and Lorraine Warren did not run a nonprofit organization, a free paranormal investigation. This was their job. This is what they paid for. They made their income through lectures, paid events, speaking tours, and I don't believe they ever charged for an investigation in a haunting.
No,
But
they make royalties on any books and stuff like that. So they would have gotten royalties on the book that was written about this because they are mentioned in it and all of that.
Yeah.
exactly. Another inconsistency of the incidents described by the family after living in fear, terror of the demonic presence in their home, but they would describe being living in fear and terror of this presence. But at least one neighbor would describe on a couple of instances of seeing the family outside their home, relaxing on the front porch, and showing no visible signs. Oh, sorry, was that you, Carl?
No, somebody
I heard
call.
something. Oh, sorry. I'm hearing things. The voices are back.
It's these ghosts.
I know they found me. Um, Not showing any visible sign of distress, and when asked why they were all outside, they would laughingly say that the house was haunted. So obviously, a family that is by their own how they describe it, they're living essentially under siege and under terror of an infestation of demons. Yet they're just yucking it up outside.
Yeah.
The
And
other
so
thing is to like listen, leave. If it's that bad,
Yeah.
you your kid is in a hospital getting treatment anyways. Even back then, no matter what hospital they went to, they would have been able to get into some type of like Ronald McDonald House. Ronald McDonald House has been around for a while. This is what, the 80s?
hmm
So Ronald McDonald House was
Hmm.
around in the 80s. The way, for those that don't know, for the Ronald McDonald House provides free living situations, free food, and everything to families who are of lesser means, whose children are going through chemotherapy and treatment for their cancer. So especially with them not making a lot of money, plus what's going on, they very easily could have said, "Hey, we need help." Ronald McDonald House is in every city in the country, every major city, and in order to treat the cancer, especially children's cancer, they would have had to go to a major city to treat his cancer.
Yeah.
They're not going to go to St. Joseph's and get cancer treatment. They're going to go to Cincinnati Children's. They're going to go to all of these big name hospitals to get this treatment. So they very easily, if they were that worried, they could have gone to a Ronald McDonald house and stayed there.
One of the claims, and this actually, it's interesting that you brought that up, Kayla, because in a televised interview that you can actually find on YouTube, one person did say more or less what you said. For the sake of your children, why didn't you leave? And the main answer they always gave was, the entity followed us. Where would we go? And they would
So,
leave it at that.
okay, so there's two things here. Number one, yes, a spirit or something can attach themselves to somebody, but usually when that happens, that spirit or entity will only affect that person in a negative way. But they're also talking about everybody being affected by this and multiple things. So, and my other thing of this not being true is usually when a house is haunted or somebody's attached to, those spirits don't leave those places. So, like the niece running down the street and being attacked while running down the street, that's not going to happen.
No.
That's impossible. That entity is not leaving that house if it's attached to that house. And I can almost guarantee you that if there was anything there, because of it being an old funeral home, it's attached to that house and not to anybody there. Them leaving the house, and I'm sure they were religious. So
it never really specified whether they were or not.
But look at where they are in the 80s. They're probably religious. They're probably Catholic or Christian.
They had a exorcism done.
Yeah, so
well, allegedly, and we will.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, if you're so worried about these demons, you're worried about all of this stuff, you call for an exorcism, you call for a cleansing, whatever, and then you leave.
Yeah.
Because then you go into the house, guess what? That thing's not following you anymore. This is, it's just the bricks being laid down one on top of the other for a throne of lies.
Exactly. And as we continue this, that throne is just going to get more elaborate. So one of the main aspects of these incidents that occurred was that this entity was sexually molesting and assaulting the various family members. Now, this would also describe how the entity would follow them. It would constantly harass them. It would never leave them. And this was a very big thing, especially with the nieces who were young women. This was a very striking thing, and in this time it was very familiar because this is also the plot line to the 1982 film, The Entity.
Yeah.
No.
The Entity is actually a movie. This is actually a movie my mother a movie that my mother saw. Probably saw it in theaters because it's 1982 and she was going out to theaters back then. The plot of the movie is about a young woman who starts being menaced by a demonic poltergeist entity, who also sexually assaults and harasses the main character. And often enough, the character would move. Like, at first, she thought this was a haunting, a demonic presence in the home. She left. It followed her. It even got so to the point where in the movie, they set up like a controlled laboratory, and the same thing was happening. The house wasn't haunted. This woman, the character in the movie, was haunted. This is one, and the incidents that were described by the nieces read as if they almost came right off the script. When you look at the movie The Entity and the main plot points, and then do a side by side comparison, the similarities are very clear as day.
So we're gonna see that in a lot of the hauntings that we cover. There's it's very rare for especially these high publicized hauntings to be legit. Most of them happen right after a movie comes out. These people have just went and saw the Poltergeist, and now, oh, there's a poltergeist in my house. I'm gonna make money off of this. Maybe they could make a movie off of me. Especially the movies that say that they're based on a true story. And like we'll get into, we're gonna do like the Exorcism of Emily Rose and things like that.
Blair Witch.
We are doing the Blair Witch as well. But all of this stuff is happening after these movies comes out, and they are blatantly the movies to a T. Same thing with the alien abductions. A lot of them are really, the only one that wasn't like alien abduction was Travis
Walton.
Yes, his wasn't like the movies. Obviously, now a movie was made off of his stuff, but great movie. We'll cover Travis Walton and talk about it, but yeah. So all of these are this stuff to a T, and we're gonna see that as we touch on all this other hauntings.
Another point in this whole drama of the haunting is actually the role of their son Philip. Now, in Ray Groton's book, he alleges that Philip was actually caught fondling one of his female cousins, and when questioned by the police, he admitted to committing this crime habitually and doing so secretly at night, and was never caught doing so. He even admitted to having a incestuous desire for his cousin, and even once tried to sleep with her.
So he's after a ghost.
Yeah. After this admission, Philip was taken. Well, I don't know.
This is Alabama.
This is people in Connecticut are strange. And to any listeners in Connecticut, you know you are. Don't try and lie.
Same thing with Alabama. You know.
After this admission, Philip was actually taken to a juvenile detention center and evaluated by a psychiatrist there, who diagnosed him as a schizophrenic. So it is actually very possible that the incidents by the nieces, while these incidents, it's possible they may have occurred, but instead of being a poltergeist or a demonic presence, this is just their coping mechanism for the fact that their cousin just sexually assaulted them.
Yeah,
exactly.
Which happens. But it feels like the other stories by like the parents and such like that was kind of made to push it under the
what happens a lot, and this is coming from both law enforcement experience and medical, is when you do have traumas like this of sexual assault, not just from a family member, but from anybody, and obviously sexual assault is not something to be taken lightly, and when
personal experience with that.
Yeah, so when sexual assault happens, a lot of people try and put walls up and use different coping mechanisms, and they'll sling stories that make them feel better, like especially with it being an incestual relationship.
Yeah,
that's obviously not right morally. It's not right morally. And so it makes them feel better and not feel as bad about themselves by saying, oh, a ghost sexually assaulted me, a demon sexually assaulted me. And it's very, very common in sexual assault cases to come up with something other than the real victim.
It should also be noted that with a lot of these, with this, I found very interesting about this is that despite Philip, the son, having essentially starting this haunting, he seems to be very conspicuously absent for a majority of these things. After a certain point, he just starts acting out, which actually really honestly sounds like a teenager thing. He's just kind of shuffled off, and we never see him again until Ray Grouton starts writing the book, and he starts making these allegations, but we never hear from him or anything.
So, question: was it only this specific female cousin that was speaking about being assaulted? I remember it was also the parents.
The parents also spoke of it. There were two cousins. As far as I can tell, both of them made the allegations of the same thing. But as we've seen, we don't where one ends and the other begins is unknown. It could have been both. It could have just been the one. It probably was neither, honestly, or at least however it was, like I said, if it was just a regular, unfortunate sexual assault that was just coped with, it is hard to determine, but it seems to just be the one cousin that was the center of Philip's alleged impropriety.
So it definitely feels like they're trying to brush it under the rug.
It really feels, honestly, it feels like, yes, they were trying to brush it under the rug as best they can, but then they decided to add to their story to spice it up, I guess.
Yeah, and really capitalize off of their niece's horrific experience.
And they're one of the key points that a lot of people point out is that the Snedekers very much their neighbors did not support them, except for maybe a couple of their neighbors who the most they would do is that one neighbor contended that they probably did actually encounter some paranormal activity in the home, but it was not to the degree that they reported, and were simply found an opportunity to make some money off of it.
Yeah. I feel like if it was so many people, somebody would have shown signs.
And of course,
this was happening to them.
One of the things for me was the whole incident of the niece running down the street screaming and being abused the whole time. Again, who's not hearing this? This is Southington, Connecticut is a suburb. It's not a rural town. This is a suburban town of Hartford, Connecticut. This is a very built-up area. It was built up in the 80s. Pretty sure someone
would have looked out.
Yeah, and there would have been some kind of indent to show that something is present on her person.
Well, not necessarily. Not all entities do leave marks. It really depends on the entity and the level of torture. But I will say that with this, I mean, to be honest, if this would have happened nowadays, she would have been psych evaled very quickly.
Yeah.
Openly claiming this, she would have been psych evaled and she would have failed.
Absolutely. One other sticking point of this, and this is the behavior of Ed Warren throughout this investigation, or at least to the point of when the Warrens would show up. It is no surprise. Ed probably did no favors to his credibility, reputation, or the reputation or credibility of this haunting with his behavior, which was described at best as off-putting. Ed would
Ed.
No way, never.
Ed was described as being very argumentative, combative, and belligerent to anybody who showed even the slightest doubt. In many of the interviews, he would routinely shout down or shout down any of the critics, neighbors. He actually accused some of the neighbors of the Snedeker family of being paid off by the landlord, so that the landlord could just extort money from the Snedeker family. I mean, it's called back rent. So
this isn't just this case. This is frequent with the Warrens. Ed Warren was known to have a temper and known to, this is how he got successful, is he bullied and scared people into shutting up and going along with the stories that he was telling.
He is a God-fearing person.
I can tell you right now, everybody, our listeners there, if you're a fan of the Conjuring movies, which I am, I love the Conjuring movies.
Yeah.
Not so much the Annabelle movies, but the actual core Conjuring ones.
That's the Warrens.
We're good. They paint
They
not
paint them
rely
as
on
fucking
that.
heroes.
Oh my
and that's
God.
especially part
And
of why,
that is because of the Warrens. The Warrens literally paid them to say, "Hey, make us look good."
Yeah, and that's
My
why
God,
I read that kind of tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
Because in those movies, they are portrayed as God-fearing husband and wife.
I mean, the woman's a healer.
Right. And,
Jesus, put a cape on her. She's just like...
Yeah.
Super heroine.
Ed Warren would, again, he would frequently become abusive. There was one incident that's actually, if you actually watch the Conjuring movie, they actually, it's taken out of context because it was, the actual debate was with the Snedeker where they had one of his critics, I forget his name, but he's a very famous critic of haunted houses, and he said, and he is quoted saying, "I never met a house that was haunted, and Ed Warren never found a house that wasn't haunted." And this is very true. Ed and Larry Warren would go into a home, it's haunted.
Right.
It's haunted. It's always haunted.
Right. That's what they built their business on.
Exactly, and it's very important. This is a business. Now, to be fair, as they did this as a business, if this is how they make their income and charge people for at least like speaking and writing tours and everything, that's their prerogative. They made it their business, but it seems that that was their main motivation for it. And instead of being serious investigators, they seem to just, as he said, we just find all the crazy people. Same people don't come to us.
Yeah, they're like manipulating the mentally vulnerable for their own gain.
It really feels like that way. And one of the contentions that this is something that I point out is a very inconsistency, and I just don't get how people just don't get this. Is one of the things is that they said they arranged an exorcism with the church for the Snedeker family to cleanse it with a person they called Father A. No name. They said that they had worked with him before, but when pressed about like who is this? What is his name? Father A, Arthur, whatever. He's like, no, it's Father A. That's all you're saying, and that's all I have to say. I don't have to tell you anymore. When they questioned the validity of this, saying, okay, yeah, you're making this up, he exploded in a tirade and said, listen, this Father A is real. This was a real exorcism, and you can read it in public records at the chancellery. This is not true. First off, if you go to the Archdiocese of Hartford, which covers Southington, Connecticut, there is no record of an exorcism. Further to the point, the church does not publicly disclose exorcisms.
I will say this, and I'm not taking his side. In his mind, it may have been a real exorcism. However, it was not a sanctioned exorcism. And there is a huge difference.
So
there is.
The Catholic Church will not, in a majority of cases, sanction an exorcism of whether it be a house or a person for fear of bad publicity.
So this is my thing. I don't believe it's a real priest.
No, I have no doubt.
I think because if he were a real priest and this was sanctioned by the Catholic Church, they would have no problem releasing the name. The Catholic Church would release the name.
They no, they will not actually. So this is something that I have learned as going to Catholic schools and talking to a number of priests. They will not actually do that. They will not disclose. They do not disclose exorcisms. They don't disclose the identities. They don't. This is a very closely guarded secret because Aaron says the Vatican has to sanction it. They don't sanction
Right.
these very
Yeah.
often, and a lot of it is, like you said, reputation. Because if this goes bad, as we see with Emily Rose, it went bad and she died. Which you can die in an exorcism. People have died in exorcisms
Right.
through either whether they be not a real exorcism
Well, it's because
and
they're
someone
being tortured.
exactly,
Mhm.
or it is an actual real exorcism and the demonic entity decided to be like, fuck you, kill the person. But they don't reveal this. You cannot just go to the Vatican, to the archdiocese or whatever. You can look up, hey, who got an exorcism in my neighborhood? No, they're never going to do that. In fact, the the boy actually who was the inspiration behind the movie and the book The Exorcist, he went into his all the records of the church that were used. He was known as Roland Doe. That was his name. That's when
Yeah,
if
like
the
Jane
rec
Doe.
exactly, because they protect your privacy. They do not do that because again, reputation plus the fact everybody's going to keep going to the church and say my child is possessed by a demon. They're
Yeah.
acting out. It's like
And
that's called teenage. That's called puberty, madam. Please raise your child properly.
Um,
Or people with serious mental illnesses
That need
saying, "I
help.
need
Yeah.
Well-
that." Yes, you're exactly need help. The church. One of the things the church will do when if they are called to investigate demonic possession, unless you have a pre-existing condition that denies you the prevents you from using this, you will be pumped full of every antidepressant and antipsychotic medicine known to science. So to make sure to see, okay, does this work? Does this work? Oh, okay, yeah, he had this. He's not possessed. So
well, to go back to what I was saying is this he I obviously it's not sanctioned by the church, but I don't believe he was a real priest at all. I
No.
think this guy was an actor that they hired to bring in and fake an exorcism, convince the family that so what happens and what has happened is there actually has been, and we will talk about this, there has been an exorcism that was televised. There was an exorcism in the 90s that was televised. And we will be discussing that one because it's very rare. But what a lot of times what happens with exorcisms, especially especially with fake ones like this, is they are pumping them full of medications that their bodies don't need because they don't have whatever illness they're suspecting, because God forbid they bring in a real doctor and let's let a priest make a medical diagnosis. It makes no sense. So instead of bringing in a doctor, they bring in a priest to make a medical diagnosis. The priest then gives them the wrong medication, which then they have a reaction to and start displaying signs of a reaction such as sweating and not being able to speak properly. So they're claiming that this is a demon speaking through them and this and that. And so that's what I believe that this guy was doing, is putting all this stuff in there. He's dosing them up with meds to make them do this, and then showing the family like, hey, there's a demon, I'm going to exorcise them, gives them the meds to bring them down from whatever he gave them, and boom, exorcism done.
Well,
Complete.
and here's another thing that needs to be noted: the son that was
Philip.
molesting Philip was diagnosed allegedly. He was diagnosed schizophrenic.
Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
that is hereditary.
Yep.
It is.
So more than likely, the mother and or father or both are schizophrenic.
Possibly. It
Right.
Schizophrenia can skip generations.
It can, sure, but it doesn't normally.
But it's also not normal for both parents to have schizophrenia. But
Right.
if
And I
the
think it's, if I remember correctly, it's more predetermined for the female.
I think schizophrenia is, somebody will correct us, but I think schizophrenia is paternal, and like bipolar is maternal, I believe. Um, I can
Well,
look it up as we continue,
those that know, chime in.
but yeah, so
Um,
it's very possible that they were schizophrenic and hearing the voices, and that is also something that happens a lot with
Yeah.
exorcisms, is the schizophrenia. They're hearing the voices, they're responding to the voices. Another thing that you hear is the bipolar, where they're having different moods, and
Right.
sometimes, especially for people, a lot of the exorcisms that we see are in other countries. They're really common there. They're obviously became a lot more common in the U.S., but you get people that are bilingual, so one of those bipolar swings brings them into another language that people didn't. People say, "Oh, I didn't know they could speak that language." We're
Yeah, and
we're in Italy. Why are they speaking Italian?
yeah, and mania can do intense things
Oh yeah.
oh,
to
absolutely.
people that are dealing with that.
Also, speaking of into the schizophrenia with Philip, it is it would also explain some of the if hallucinations, because he reported seeing a man with black eyes, white hair, pinstripe suit. He's already in an environment that he's like, hey, I used to be where the dead people are. He's
Yeah.
Right.
I would I remember growing up, and my dad would occasionally, he have to take jobs for construction work down in the southern tier of Western New York. He would just be like, "Oh, they're putting us up in the hotel for the weekend." And I didn't grow up in the nicest neighborhoods, and so me and my mother would be like locking it. What was it that it was before the movie The Purge, but you know that little
Yeah, the air
and you
horn.
just like, that was just me and my mom locking everything down, and we just be like, you hear a little creak. What is that? What is that?
Yeah.
What is that? You jump at shadows. So imagine if this kid does have schizophrenia, he's in an environment, he's got the stress and mania of dealing with his potentially life-ending cancer. Oh, and I'm in a room that was once used to prepare the dead for burial.
Yeah.
Gosh, nightmare fuel, anybody? Um, but I think the thing to take away from all this is that this really feels like a hoax. Maybe they encountered paranormal activity, maybe they didn't. But it seems like the very cold, cruel exploitation of two people,
Yeah.
of their children, of their family,
Yeah.
make a quick buck, and
I think
then
it's
swoop in the Warrens to just get their cut of the
right.
pie.
Right. I think it's very possible that there was minute incidences, an unexplained noise, this, that, or the other. It happens, and I think that was the spark that they needed,
I I
and they just started adding fuel to that, get that fire going, call in the Warrens, and boom, now we have this raging inferno going, and let's make a buck.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't think there was anything that sparked it.
And
Besides them needing money, I don't think there was any noises or anything, because the other person that lived in that building said they heard absolutely nothing. And
Well,
there's
Yeah.
she's
there is
exempt. She lives
absolutely
in there.
no way that they heard stuff that she didn't in the same building.
nobody all the witnesses, the people who spoke out against the Snedeker family, none of these people benefit from lying
Right.
about them.
Right.
The only people who benefit really from the situation in line are the Senators. They get out of their back rent. They make money. They get out of possibly a bad living situation that they don't want to be in it anymore. They benefit. The Warrens benefit from lying. Everyone. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's another parallel there that you just mentioned that was similar with the last episode, being behind in rent, needing to get out of rent, needing to get the money.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with the last episode
With the Lutzes at Amityville.
Mm-hmm.
As
Mhm.
also another thing that I found out about this house. Currently, the house that the Snedekers owned, it is still currently occupied. It is somebody's personal home now, and these people have been living there for 10 years, and they have recorded nothing.
I'm not gonna
Nothing
lie.
has happened.
I'm sure the Warrens would take
I-
credit for that.
I'd live there.
So
Yeah.
here's the thing
I
too.
wouldn't.
So
Unless it was completely stripped out, like everything, every traces of a funeral home being gone.
well, I'm pretty sure that the Snedekers weren't the first people to live there after it being converted
Right.
from a mortuary. So we have no other claims, and then we go on to, and I don't think you touched on this, but you may have touched on this, but I know that Ed and Lorraine researched into the house, saw that it was a mortuary, and were saying that the funeral directors were practicing necromancy in there.
I did mention that, but when I was looking through the main source that I was getting for this did not really touch on that. I thought I searched something about that. That sounded
Yeah, so
odd. That's
right here, where is, and it goes into, and that's where we get it into the movie, the plot of the movie.
Right.
Is they believe that that's what it was. So, and of course the movie is literally called The Haunting in Connecticut. And obviously they see their psychic research and seances and stuff like that. And so the Warrens did really believe that there was necromancy happening in there. I just
Did they use the term necromancy?
In the movie?
in the movie, yes.
Okay, it's been a while since I've seen the
Yeah,
movie.
in the movie, they claim that they were that seances, or when they did a seance, that the remains and stuff had told them that necromancy was happening.
Right. As a matter of fact, the priest actually tells the boy and the parents.
Yeah. It's just, so I obviously it's just a big money grab. And they made money off of it. I mean, a book was written, same what, In a Dark Place, I believe is what it is.
Yes, by Ray Grouton.
And then, so they're getting money off of In a Dark Place, both the Warrens and the Snedekers. They're still getting royalties. Anytime he sells that book, they're still getting royalties. That family's getting royalties. Obviously, the Warrens aren't getting anything anymore.
They're dead.
Because they were dead.
It also, a number of TV shows have actually prominently featured the Snedeker family and the story about the haunting in Connecticut. I actually remember a very well-known paranormal show on the Discovery Channel. I actually think it might have been like the first of Paranormal Files. I believe it was the one where they have like the actors playing out the situation.
Yeah.
And there'd just be the guy, the deep dark, the
Mhm.
Warrens would do like that. It was actually, I think that was like really one of the first, big paranormal TV shows that Discovery started like playing on there. before all the reality TV haunting shows took over. But the first episode I remember was a haunting in Connecticut, and I remember it scared the shit out of me. And I was like, "This is a document. Is this a movie or a documentary? This is a documentary or a movie? Holy
Yeah.
crap!"
So
Um,
literally any time that anybody is using this story, all of these people are getting royalties. They're getting money, and it's just a big money grab. And again, I've stated this before. I believe in ghosts. I believe in all of that. I believe in hauntings. But this is a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
When
It
you
really
have to call in Ed and Lorraine Warren to validate what your claims are, like, to be honest, if they wouldn't have died, Ed died in 2006, Lorraine just died in 2019.
yeah, very recently. She was she was over 100.
And
Yeah.
she was still going as long as she could. And I still believe that they would be out there trying to make some more money and make more movies. But
yeah, exactly. Like for me, and I'll ask this. Who see? I always felt the better of the televised ghost hunters was always Taps, the people who did Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi Channel. I always
I
felt
remember that.
yeah, with Jason Hawes
as
and
long as it's not Zach Baggins, because he's a
No.
fucking joke.
he really is. The Taps team I always felt was I felt was like the best standard for if you're gonna televise doing this, go in with the idea that this is not a haunted house or whatever. And I mean, eventually, I think they fell into the trap that every televised ghost hunting crew does fall into. They just go to the famous locales just for the ratings to keep the show going, which is, again, at the end of the day, they are, Taps did start out as a nonprofit, volunteer group. So, but then this became their thing, their income. So they went what the money is, but I felt they always still went in to think, oh, let's see if we can debunk it.
Yeah.
And there were plenty in the first few seasons. They debunked plenty of stuff. They went there to like we have the ghost of this monk that walks the grounds. He's like, is there a monastery or a church nearby?
Yeah.
No. I'm like,
well, yeah, and that's the thing
nearby?
with like Zach Baggins. Have you ever watched an episode where there's not a ghost?
Nope.
There's
some kind
always
of weird,
a ghost,
messed
and he runs in there, kicks down the door. I'm gonna fucking kill you, ghost! And then I just got possessed. Oh, I don't know what happened. Like that literally is every episode. Like I want to fucking kill you. Looking right to his friend.
Truth.
I want to like they went and visited the hotel that Richard Ramirez stayed at. It was it was the big episode that they did that got a lot of people to download one of the streaming platforms just for that, and I watched it. I thought I liked it just because the Stanley. It's an interesting story, but they go into the Richard Ramirez room and they all feel like they want to kill somebody because this is where Richard Ramirez worshiped the devil, but in between his killings. And I walked in there and I felt a sharp pain in my neck, and I wanted to look over to him and wrap my arms around his neck and strangle him to death. But then I walked outside, took a breath, and I was fine. That's how
convenient.
That is how Zach Baggins is. Zach Baggins, you are a fucking joke. Just saying. So, and it's kind of sad because I listened to another podcast which helped inspire us to do this, which is Necronomipod, and they had on a paranormal investigator, which I need to rewatch the episode so I can get her name. I'm going to see if I can get her in with us. That would be awesome.
Jason
Um,
Hawes or Grant or if
well,
any of the TAPS members ever listen to this,
I
please, we would love to talk to
I
you too.
forget what her name is,
I
but
would at least.
she's a legit paranormal investigator, and she worked with all of those people. She worked with Zach Baggins' crew at the beginning and said that he was a legitimate paranormal investigator. And then when the TV show came and the ratings came, their first few shows there were legit hauntings. And then he saw the ratings and he started faking stuff. He was putting rods in walls to make pictures drop off. He was putting speakers in walls and doing this and that, manipulating cameras, and it just got to be about money and ratings. So,
As it did with the Warrens,
Yeah.
as it did with a lot of these hauntings.
yeah.
And I think we should. I think to end this note on to everybody, I tried to find some words of wisdom for it. Don't jump to conclusions. Really, there's really no deeper meaning for this. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't believe anything the Warrens say. And if you somehow do encounter a very scary paranormal entity, try not to panic. I don't know. I've had paranormal
Get the fuck out of Dodge.
Yeah.
there you go. That too. Because guess what? If your house is haunted, it can't follow you. Actually, in most
Yep.
cases, entities don't follow you.
And
That
if
is
you're
just
stuck with them, get proof.
yeah.
Um, and
Also, it should be noted the Catholic Church doesn't exorcise houses because houses aren't real things. In order to become possessed by a demon, you have to have a soul. So gingers are safe.
so one thing.
Oh, I guess my kids are good.
So
I'm
one
not
thing
gonna
that
say anything.
one thing that we're gonna do is, actually Ben and his wife are coming down to visit in May, and I got free tickets to the Ohio State Reformatory, which is the most
Ooh.
haunted prison in the United States. It's defunct. There's a prison behind it, but the actual reformatory doesn't exist. Well, we're doing a self-guided tour, and I think I'm gonna email them and see if we're allowed, but I'm going to see if I can record us going through it and going through the reformatory, because we can't record during a guided tour, but I'm pretty sure we're allowed to record during the self-guided tour. So, and
We
with
just
a
gotta stop it to protect we're for ourselves.
yeah, with the self-guided tour, you see like 85% of the facility. So, I got free tickets. I won free tickets for that, and I got 4 tickets. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna wait till Ben and Pam can go, and I promised Pam that we wouldn't go at night when it's the most haunted. We're going during self-guided tour during the day. But yeah, so if I'm allowed to, I will record that and we will actually post it. That'll be at the end of May. And we'll let you guys know once I find out if I can record that. And maybe for that week we will do a episode on the Ohio State Reformatory.
That would be interesting just to see a little history behind it
Yeah.
and see what the cause of some hauntings are.
But yeah, so we want to thank everybody for joining. We will be back next week with another episode. And yeah, we want to thank Cara and Elliot for joining us as well. They won't be here every week, but they will be here off and on depending on what the topics are. But with that, I want to thank you for visiting the Scarlet Tavern. Remember to turn in your glasses, push in your seat, and as always, don't forget to tip the bard. Have a good night, everybody.
Night.
All right.